I thought tonight what we could talk about, I'll answer any questions that you have, is to share notes on the inspirational things maybe that get us going, that create that drive to go forward. At the end of the day, when you talk about what you've acquired over time and your holdings and your assets, I can tell you it's real simple, just like most things in life if you don't complicate it.
So before we dive too deep, take me back a little bit. So obviously involved in the ranch and property title, Torres law, right? You have a lot going on, but take me back to a point before all of that. What was life like kind of getting started?
Okay, before that, 50 years ago. How many of you all were around 50 years ago? Oh, okay, no, you weren't, huh? Okay. 50 years. Yeah. Life was different in St. Bernard, and that's an interesting question because when I reflect back, I've had 2 bites at the apple here, and I'm really pleased with that. The first half of my career was before Katrina, and the rest was after Katrina. And 50 years ago, it's the old saying, the more things change, the more they remain the same, and that's a lot of truth to that. And when I go back 50 years ago, the population in St. Bernard was approximately 50,000. We built up to right under 70,000, and then overnight we went down to 0 with Katrina, and now we're back, I think, in the 45,000 range or something like that. So if you want to translate that and what does it mean in population growth over the years, my first 35 years we were growing at a rate of approximately 600 people a year. And in such Katrina, it's been approximately 1,800 a year. And I've been blessed to have gained that experience over 35 years and to jump right back in the saddle after Katrina and have been busy for the last 15 years or so since Katrina. And those of you who knew my mother, who is, and my father, who were in politics down here in St. Bernard for a long time, my mother lived to be 100, and I'm 76 at this point, and it gives me a frame of mind that I think sometimes, I got maybe another 25 years or so, maybe more, maybe less. You all may wake up in the morning and read in the paper, but in any event, I keep going, and her secret, I think part of her secret to longevity was that she kept active during that time. Yep. I could touch upon one thing back then when I first started. There were no such thing as property titles. There were just attorneys who were tied into banks. And in those days, they would just write title opinions. They'd get 1% to write that title insurance. It wasn't title insurance, 1% to write a title opinion. And I, as a young attorney, that's when mortgage companies, homesteads came along. And so we went out there, started marketing, and again, started developing relationships with the clients. And then it was switched over to where businesses like we have here, property title, were able to get in and to compete.
That's excellent. Fantastic. So staying in that vein of property title, what are obviously, right, active sale, the closings is a big part of what y'all do. What other services or what else can real estate investors or anybody involved in real estate, what can we take advantage of that property title offers?
Well, it depends on what stage you're at. If you come in, and over the years I have many people who came in and it was their first deal, and if you're coming in setting up, whether you just want to be an investor to buy a house, a double, or apartments, to talk about what type of entity you should set up to do it, and talk about the ramifications of that, maybe planning into the future, and how you might want it to be handled down the line. I've enjoyed over the years getting to know the clients, and I could think of many examples over the years where, in the old days, going back 50 years ago, when builders down here, a lot of them worked for either Kaiser Aluminum or the refineries, and they would build on the side. Bobby Berthelot, by the way. Bobby, where are you? He's a legend in St. Bernard, Robert Berthelot. And he was a builder way back then, was hugely successful. And back in those days, and the market was really good. It was rocking along, and of course, Bobby, right out of the chute. Matter of fact, he built the first office building we had, the Randazzo building, where I first started my practicing law. I would build relationships, and Bobby and I could tell war stories all day. I remember a young man came in. He said, "I'm building a house, and I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to make profit." And then he came back and says, I'm going to build another house. And he was using the money, he was parlaying his money. And he was doing really well. And there was a time back then when people really spec'd on houses. Bobby, I think people would spec, what, 10 or 20 at a time sometimes? Maybe even more than that. And so I got to know him. I built relationships with people who had the money, the banks and the finance the homesteads. And so I said, why don't we get you a line of credit, so you can, up the ante here. Instead of building 2 or 3 at a time, maybe you could do 5 or 10 and maybe then 20. And so part of what I did, and it's all relationship. Mm-hmm. When you got an attorney, you're dealing with somebody, and of course I was getting business out of it, but I have to say I was getting enjoyment out of it, watching people become successful.
Fantastic. Love it. And you kind of mentioned some things like structure and some things, right? What are some things that we as investors or whatever it is we do in real estate, what can we do to help kind of protect ourselves or protect our assets? What are some things?
It depends on a particular situation, whether you want to do it in an LLC or you want to do it in a corporation, if you want to buy the properties in separate LLCs. And that's something that you'd want to discuss depending upon, what your goal is down the line. And we do it in various ways, but that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is to get title insurance, particularly in this day and age. The main things in the title world that you're faced with now, not only unknown liens and taxes, but nowadays people are getting shrewd. You have fraudulent sellers, you have rerouting funds, and it's dangerous. And so you want to be able to make sure that you're protected, and you start off with title insurance and deal with people who can accommodate. If you go to a sale, for instance, and I've seen some horror stories, and let's say it's a $250,000 transaction, and somehow the money gets, and there's some sophisticated thieves out there these days, and when they steal your money, it doesn't go anywhere where you can retrieve it. It's in another country before, just like that. And you go to the sale, everything's signed, and all of a sudden the seller goes to cash a check, and they said there's no money in this account. Okay, and at that point in time, you're caught in between. And the problem with it is it's timing. What do? Do you say, let's undo the deal and the person just lost $250,000? No. Got to figure a way to come up with the money. And so if you're dealing with somebody who's closing the deal, they better have $250,000 that they can put up. Now they can go back and retrieve it. But you can't tell that poor seller, you're out of your money, you're in a quandary. And so always get your title insurance and make sure you're dealing with people who have experience and who could back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Obviously, we kind of talked about all of the different things that you're involved in, right? So one of my questions for you was, how do you manage your time? How do you balance being involved in so many different things?
Well, first of all, I enjoy it, and it just seems to flow. And I'm, again, just very fortunate to have good people. And if you have good people that you can trust, that's what it's all about. When I look around, I give all the credit to them, and so that's helpful. They make life easy for me when I come in, and I can sort of pick and choose. And I've been fortunate. My wife and I, we were into horses, Pasofino horses, and so I try to find that balance to be able to do things to keep me going. But I keep coming back. I get up early in the morning. Now I do go to bed early. Okay, and and if you're passionate about what you do, what's the old saying? You've got to. How does that go? If you have a
never work a day.
You never work a day, and there's truth to that. Again, everything is so basic and true, and so I've just been very blessed, to have the opportunity to do what I do, and in balancing my time, I enjoy simple things in life. I say simple. I love coffee houses. When I travel, I always seek out the local coffee house. We have some of the best around, right down here in St. Bernard. And I go to, if somebody wanted to assassinate me, which I'm not worthy of assassination, they would know exactly where I am. I go to either coffee house, PJ's, I frequent the coffee house down here, sometimes in New Orleans. And we have things, and this is what makes St. Bernard great, by the way. Every Wednesday, we go to the coffee house in Araby, and on Tuesdays I go to the PJ's. Matter of fact, I see Carly Jackson in here, And on both of those days, we just kind of had, I guess for years now, I'd run into Jimmy Pullman and the parish president and several other, and we get together. On Tuesdays I go to their venue over at PJ's, and on Wednesdays they come to mine, and then Jason comes in and we share notes and we talk about all the things that are going around us, and so life is good in that regard. Have a good balance.
Yeah, very unique place here. And you mentioned people a couple of different times, right? Finding the right people. What advice would you give for those of us that are looking to build that team or building a business? How have you found those people, or what advice would you give?
Well, I've just been fortunate. I've been lucky. They just came along, and you just have to, judge the people, and frankly, just make the people part of your family. When I look at the people I work with, just in over time, time and time again, that has proven to be the formula for success is just to have people who can really work with you. And they're out there. And I could tell you, again, I'm very bullish on St. Bernard. Most of them are down here. Going back my 50 years back then, St. Bernard used to be a bedroom community. And when I go to the city, whether it was a Supreme Court or a federal judge or wherever I went to, a doctor's office, there was always somebody in that office, and usually they were running that office. Okay? And so we got good people right down here in our backyard.
I love it. Yeah, and I agree. I think St. Bernard Parish is definitely a special place. What do you see as the future of St. Bernard? Looking forward 10, 20, and beyond years, what's your outlook?
Well, I see a bright future for St. Bernard. I always say that after Katrina, we were in shock. But then when we woke up, we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. We realized that we had an empty canvas, and so it gave us an opportunity. It'll never be like it was before. There was an older generation here. I guess now I am the older generation, but while it's different. For instance, I'll give you an example. If Katrina wouldn't hit, we wouldn't have had the opportunity for the ranch and many of the other things that we're doing. And I'll use this opportunity just to tell you, that's why we got to keep our eye on the ball. There's a bright future for St. Bernard, but not if that Port of New Orleans comes down here and puts a 1,000-acre development in the middle of our community. We've coexisted with industry down here, and I've always represented people against industry to keep them honest. And we've coexisted and we've got along quite fine up until this point. But we're right on the edge, with the pollution and everything. This will be the complete demise of St. Bernard Parish. And that's what I do in my other spare time, is I've taken on that battle pro bono for the people of St. Bernard. And we're going to fight it. And a lot of people say, oh, it's a done deal. It's not a done deal. And the reason it's not a done deal is because it's wrong. Wrong is wrong, right is right, black is black, white is white. And they're not going to win at the end of the day because this is totally wrong for this community.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me get on the stump there a little bit. I'm very passionate about that.
Absolutely. I'm sure it was going to come up in a Q&A question at some point anyway. But so speaking of that, right, doing that pro bono, right, I think it's no secret that you're very involved in the community. You give a lot back. You're, I would say, a staple of St. Bernard Parish, you and your family. Where does that come from? As far as being part of the community, giving back, is that something you got from your parents, or is that something you developed?
Yeah.
Like where does that come from?
Yeah, no, my parents, my grandparents, my mother's side, my grandfather they were Italian immigrants, and they were farmers, truck farmers. My father's side, they were Isleños, and they were fishermen and hunters. Did that for a living. And I always saw them graciously giving back. And I got to tell you, I learned early on, sometimes I feel guilty about it because in giving, I get more out of it than the person who's receiving. And I see my fellow members of the mayoral board here tonight, Floyd Yu and Bill Haynes and Chris Haynes. And we have a tremendous, that's a whole nother story and topic to talk about the opportunities we have in St. Bernard with the Mayoral Foundation. I'm proud to serve on the board. And we sit there and hours in a sense when we're talking about just doling out the money. We do a lot more things than just parceling out money. That's the easy job. The people who are out there are receiving it, who can get it into commerce. And so, yes, I got it from my parents, my grandparents, and those of us who do that. And I look around the room and I know there's a lot of people here are very generous people. And in that there's a truth to it, in giving you receive more than when you receive.
Absolutely. And then to circle back, you kind of touched on industry, right? When you talked about the port and partnering with industry. I think Sold on St. Bernard was a fantastic program, right? What they did in most of Araby. What are your thoughts on, I think there's some areas where maybe there's opportunities to do something similar on the commercial side of real estate, right? Any thoughts on what we can do to maybe develop or bring businesses in or kind of incentivize some development on the commercial side?
Right. I think you've already done it. I think you could model things after Grow St. Bernard. And just looking at the people we have here tonight, 50 years ago, it would have been Robert and maybe a handful of us, multiple times that now, and you all are all interested and you know what you're doing. And it's just getting out there and finding the opportunities and making it happen. And the good news is Grow St. Bernard was such a huge success. I remember we did it the first meeting at the Ford plant.
Right.
And we had it over there, and some of the people who I met for the first time there. And I remember when it was first set up, and parish government was instrumental, and they had a lot of positive input, constructive input as to how to do it. And it was somewhat of an ambitious plan to do that. I mean, ended up developing on lots which back then they were trying to figure out how to get rid of them, and now so I would say it was a hugely successful program, and what that's done is laid the groundwork for future development for the parish. We have an opportunity down here in St. Bernard like we never had before. If we're at, let's say, 45,000 now, and over the next 15 years we grow it up to whatever number we can, we have a fantastic opportunity to do that. And I think, an answer to your question is just everybody coming up with the different ideas of how to build it better, and that's what we did in Araby.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of Araby, you have the Ford plant. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of what you have there?
That's another example. Again, we okay, Tom?
Yeah, we're good.
The Ford plant. I always like to tell stories, kind of the backstories. How do you say that in the movie business?
It's a backstory.
The backstory, okay. I represented for years, and he was a very dear friend. Matter of fact, he and another dear friend who was a banker, who I did a lot of business with, he owned the Ford plant, and he and his partner owned Houston Fast Foods. They owned the franchises of Popeyes in Houston, and he owned the Ford plant. And he's a very conservative guy, and he preserved it over the years. And he came to see me one day. I always said he owned it longer than Henry Ford. He came to see me one day, and I could tell he's a little nervous because he's a very calm guy. He said, Sidney, I got this letter from my nephews, and they're saying they're going to force a sale on the Ford plant if I don't buy him out. I said, well, Cliff, buy him out. He has more money than you can imagine. Oh, no, he's very conservative. And so one thing led to another. He said, would you be interested in getting involved? And I did. And one thing or another, over time, I ended up with the Ford plant. And we've been having it now for several years. And we've done all of the studies, because, you don't just build it and they will come on something like that. That's a 250,000 square feet building on 25 acres with 800 feet on the river and rail access. And so we've been doing all of our due diligences on it. And again, at this point, I'm just having fun with it, all of the different studies and all of the things we have. And we have our inspiration boards. Before you leave, you could look back there. And it started off, and this is Jimmy, I said, and every time we talk about something, we'll do an inspiration board. And I got to tell you, not all the time does it come about, but it's fun while you're there. I have my office where I could look at them all the time. It starts off with Henry Ford, and I gave you a little card there. That's a little bookmarker, remind you of the Ford plant. And he was quite the character. And but in the 20s, Henry Ford decided that it made more sense to assemble the vehicles outside of Detroit. And so he hired the famous architect, Albert Kahn, and they designed an assembly plant, one of which was built here in Old Araby. And like I said, it sat there, and we're very fortunate. The people who have come down and evaluated over time said it's the best example of a Ford assembly plant anywhere.
Wow. Because
it's in good shape. And so we have some plans for that, and that's the type of thing, and Grow St. Bernard has helped us looking at that. That, when you talk about developing that whole site there, that's a major development. And one of the things we have, if you look at our vision board back there, is incorporating the ranch operation as part of, not moving this, but in addition to this. And Jason and Jimmy came up with the idea, and I think we came up with an assembly place for creative minds. And it's fun to look at, and we've talked, we've had through here Disney, Netflix, we've got all the major players. And we sit down and some of the people I'll tell my ideas to, I know they're looking at me and saying, what did he have for breakfast this morning? Coming up with some ideas that seem far out there. But they get it, they understand it, and they love the location down here. And so we're looking forward to going forward with it. And I could tell you, don't know exactly where we're going to go with it. You'll see some vision boards back there with some condos. There will be condos on that site at some point. There'll be a residential component. There'll be some commercial. There'll be, it's actually going to be a destination location when it's finished. And we're very careful in developing it. And I've never been anxious. Again, it's one of those things, it's sort of like if you captured a Chinese army, you have to feed them. And so you got to be careful on a big project. But I'm getting at a stage where I wouldn't use the word anxious, but I'm wanting to promote it a little more now. And so we're in a phase where we meet every couple of weeks to talk about what's going to be the next step.
That's great. Very exciting. So obviously, we've talked about a lot of things you're involved in, and obviously tremendous success. If you look back, what is one lesson that, had you learned earlier or just starting out, would have made a tremendous impact? What's one lesson you wish you'd learned earlier in your career?
Keep it simple. Whatever you do, don't overly complicate it. Follow your passion. Do things that you really want to get involved with that keeps you motivated. Those are kind of the basic things. All of the other rules I could sit here and talk about. Well, you got to, looking back then, sometimes when you're younger, you don't realize that things again are going in the right direction.
Right.
That don't necessarily overthink them. You always have a sense when you're doing the right thing, going in the right direction. And so basically, I guess at this stage, you can do a whole lot with a lot less worrying, anxiety, just by sitting there and having clarity of mind. And basically that's it, like I said. And I guess I used the example before. Everything's on your path. Just keep doing your part as you go along, and don't over anxietize about it. And you're going to get there.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. Any books that you recommend that have been pivotal, or things that you're reading now, or any books that you recommend?
Well, of course, the Bible.
Sure.
And as you get older, you start realizing there's other books. And look, I encourage you. When I was coming up in my early career, it was Robert Schuller. You see the Sons and Heirs on TV now, and Robert Vincent Peale. Do you remember those names? And they were all about positivity. And there's so many books on positive that can encourage you to be positive. And what I suggest you do is you just find the ones that really appeal to you. And frankly, you reach a stage where, again, getting back to things being simple, there comes a point in life where you realize, and I'm not there yet, when you get it, you only need that one book, the Bible. And there's a spin-off on it. If you heard of Imitation of Jesus, which I think is the second most read book around. And I don't mean to get into religion, but let me tell you, it's what it's all about, man. People, it's the most read book in civilization for generations. And so now there's a lot of other things. We all did our homework and read all the books we were supposed to in high school and college and so forth. And those these days to me kind of get boring. But I still like the books with positive and again, it could be simple. The little daily motivational things. Probably a lot of you do that. And it just kind of keeps you going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And we can go down that road. How has your faith or religion, how has that played into your business and life and success?
Well, yeah, I think there's a confirmation in there. Again, all of the answers are there. And I think with age and maturity and And it's not at the intellectual level, you know. We all feel it in a different way, and maybe even with a different religion. But it plays an important part. And I guess as you get older, there's the one sense that, well, time for me to get straight, right? I got to get my business straight. And there's a certain truth to that. But again, it's just, I think that over time, sometimes when you're younger and you think everything is gonna last forever and so forth, and then things happen during life to call you to attention, and sometimes that happens at an early age, but it's always been pivotal in my life.
Yeah, excellent. What about, and you talked about keeping things simple and finding the right people, right, some things, but what are some other skills that you've seen? And I would ask you for you personally, but I think you might be too humble to give us direct answers. But what are some skills or traits or attributes that you've seen in other people that have led to success? Mm-hmm. What are some things we can focus on?
Well, the most important thing is total dedication and passion. When I'll use my son as an example. When he was young, and I didn't know what he was going to amount to, if anything, like most children, but he was always bright. We used to go into the French Quarter, and I could remember, it sounds like I'm taking credit here a little bit, but I'd say, this place doesn't smell good and so forth, and this is the economic engine for the city and for the state of Louisiana, so they ought to have it smelling like and looking like Disneyland. Well, he later on went into, and people still talk about the good smell in the French Quarter and so forth, and he, in Sydney, and he talks about this. Sydney, when he was younger, had a drug issue, and what he did was he converted that into business and into a passion. And when you can do that, man, there's nothing to stop you. If you know what you're doing and you really want to get out. Matter of fact, I talked to him earlier today. He was on the phone. He's this. I said, well, why don't you come down? And he said, well, call me, or he'll call me, whatever. I said, maybe we'll go to dinner afterwards. And he's still at his office working with it. But it, in a word, passion for what you're doing.
That's great. And you touched on Sidney, your son, as a father, right? One thing that's important to me, I want to instill certain things into my kids, right? Not just give them a fish, as the saying goes, but teach them how to fish. Any advice for entrepreneurial parents out there for how to pass that down to the next generation?
No, but if you all have some advice, tell me. I'd like to know how I should have done it. You know what? Again, it goes back to you just be good people and treat your children. You all know all the kind of rules and sayings about that, and it kind of turns out if you give them as much guidance as you can and understand that there's a reason for everything. Sometimes the unfortunate part, there are things in life where people will maybe go in a direction and as a result of that, they're disadvantaged for for reasons they can't get back on track. But if you just keep them on track and where they're going, they'll get where they need to be. They will.
That's great. And then I probably only have one or two more, and then we can open it up if the audience has any specific questions. But what opportunity for real estate professionals or real estate investors, any specific opportunities that you see here in St. Bernard? Or I know y'all talked about one of the values of the business being that creativity and breeding creativity. Are there any creative solutions or investments that people are doing these days that you think could be a good lend to success in the future?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just do what you all are doing. I could tell by the people here, you all are serious about your business, wanting to learn about it, wanting to network, and then again, that even goes back to the basics. I'm not telling you anything you're hearing for the first time, but whether it be you go out to buy one single property or a double, and you could put it together to make that work. And if your vision is to build a real estate portfolio, then as you make money, you reinvest it. And you can do that to a certain extent. In the good old days, and you could still, this is where you want to be creative, is if you're onto a good thing, is to figure a way to leverage it but being prudent about it. You know, for instance, if you could buy a double and you can increase the value of it, and you can go get starting off with a security on that double for a bank to say, okay, now I'll lend you money to buy the next one, and then you can start parlaying. And that's the way to do it in real estate. You know, there's a lot of investments out there you can get into, and I've always been partial to real estate. You know, stock market, that's a good place once you've made a lot of money to do that too. But to come up with some ways to develop your relationships with your lenders. And you know, it's a little tough these days, and the interest is high. But a lender can make a real estate person. You know, that's why in the old days, the people who would be able to have the ins with the banks could go out and buy the real estate. Yeah, you got to make smart investments. Sure. And so my advice would be just to develop your relationships across the board, and with the lenders who have programs where they can lend you money. I mean, the ideal situation to be in is to get to the point where with your financial statement, you know, they'll say, yeah, we'll give you X amount as a line of credit. And you know, if somebody said, look, here's for instance, if you said, I sign up here, you can have a $500,000, $1 million line of credit, and you know where all the deals are, and you go start putting them together, you can do real well with that. But at the end of the day, the advice would be, you always want to be prudent. You want to make sure it's location, 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 and that you need to know what you're doing when you do that. And I can tell the people in this room here, most of you know what you're doing.
Excellent. And my last question is there any question that I should have asked, or anything else you would like to say?
No, I think you covered quite a few things on what we were to talk about tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay, excellent. So what we'll do is we'll turn it over. If anybody in the audience has a question, I'll get to you in 1 second, and then what we'll do is we'll jump in after that to kind of needs and wants, a little bit of network, and let people know who's in the room. But yeah, so I saw Courtney. I saw you had a question there.
What is a deal that has taught you one of the better lessons of your career? You know, whether it didn't go the way it was planned, but what was a deal that taught you a pretty good lesson?
I think that in a day when I was involved with apartments and building those and parlaying, I guess I learned back then, you always have to be careful that the bubble may burst at some point in time. And when I looked,
When was that?
That was going back about 50 years ago. And Bobby Berthelot was one of the best, and still is, one of the best operators of apartments and so forth down here in St. Bernard, and he went on to other things. But that was one thing I did that I learned. I didn't have, I guess, the lesson I learned was you really need to have proper management. And I'd acquired, you know, an apartment portfolio. And of course, it was caught up in the market conditions where the interest rates had gone up, and there wasn't really demand for apartments back then. And so don't think all of a sudden you're a genius and you can figure it out. And you want to be careful not to have all of your eggs necessarily in the same basket. I didn't have all my eggs in the same basket, but I learned then that you have to make sure you have your plan in place, not only to acquire, because it was working well then. I mean, we were building apartments back then, Bobby. By the time we finished, they were worth 50% more than we built them for. And I mean, that went on for a few years. And I guess I was caught up more in the values increasing, and wasn't as concerned about the cash flow and the management of the apartment. So I guess that would be the one lesson that I've learned. You know, I learned back then, and of course, at the end of the day, I still have, I think, rental units, but I went in a little bit more of a different direction.
Thank you.
That's good. Christian, you had a question?
Sidney, with all of your commercial holdings in the parish right now, are you bullish on the commercial aspect of maybe purchasing commercial property in the parish over the next few years? If you're anticipating the same type of growth that we've had over the last few years, do you think that that's a prudent investment to seek out good locations to develop business?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head, good locations. But I would say you want to be cautious, you know, with that. Whether if it's an existing building and what you have to do to it, and what type of tenant you're going to have in it. I'd say there's more of a move, people looking to buy the property and build their buildings. Okay, it seems like all of these people who have these cookie cutter operations, you were seeing urgent cares and of course the fast foods and so forth. And that's a little bit, you know, it's a little bit risky, but then again, if you find the right deal, and that gets back to if you can create your own market, you know, put both things together at one time. But if you're talking about buying existing buildings, for instance, or it could be either or.
Either or.
Yeah, either or. Yeah, I would be a little bit cautious on the buildings, because every now and then you see a building along the way that isn't rented. And, you know, we deal with that all the time. Now, that could change any time. And like I said, when I look, the ideal situation is if you find a building and you know there's somebody with a special use that you can go market it to and get a good tenant in there. Because it's all about, you know, getting the cash flow. But I'm bullish on every aspect of it. You know, I think you should look at everything that's out there.
That's good. Any other questions? Yes.
So out of all the different businesses that you and your family members have been involved in, which one was your favorite and caught you the most off guard with enjoying it?
Good question.
Well, years ago, matter of fact, it connects with the beginning of my story. One of the builders who I worked with and who got started and became really successful, we became partners in some ventures. And one Sunday morning I woke up and I saw in the paper, Victorian mansion for sale on the corner of Esplanade Avenue in Burgundy. I said, oh, this is just what I need, a Victorian mansion. So I called him up and I said, I'm going up and we're going to buy a Victorian mansion in the city. Excuse me. And anyway, long story short, it was an apartment complex. Actually, it was owned by, it's on a corner, you could still see it there. It's called the Melrose Mansion now. But when we bought it, it was Chris and Sol Owens. You know, she was the entertainer in New Orleans. And walked in there, we ended up buying it. And then we converted it into, back then, this was probably one of the first bed and breakfast type of concepts. You know, I said, well, we got something here where it's rented out as apartments. And it was cash flowing nicely. But I said, what if we redo it and we start renting it out by the night? You know, you come out a lot better if you're not just getting 30 days at a time. And so we did it. And getting back to it was a place that I enjoyed visiting all the time. And I was lucky there again because I had a great partner. He and his wife managed it. So all I had to do was show up. And again, I was the guy who would show people around. I'll tell you an interesting story. When we first started out, and then that was one of those deals where, you know, we weren't totally prepared because we got in and we started saying we're going to remodel it, we're going to do a bed and breakfast. I wake up one morning, the headlines of the Times-Picayune is, New Orleans is going to regulate bed and breakfasts. So my partner said, what does that mean? It means that if we don't do something, we got this building torn apart, we're going to have to put it together again as apartments. Well, we ended up getting it to where we were on the right side, because on the corner we're on, you're actually looking at the French Quarter. We're right in the Bywater, but it's right across from the French Quarter. And they were very strict in the French Quarter, but not in the Bywater. And so we're getting ready to open up. And do you all know Mike Early? He was the council, that's way before your time. He was a councilman in the city at the time. And so we're sitting there, Johnny's pool boy, I could remember. See, I have fond memories. And my partner, told my partner, I said, you know what? We need to get a special guest in here to get some publicity when we open this place up, because it was pretty nice the way we fixed it up. And Mike Early was eating his po' boy. He stopped for a second and says, I got a suggestion. He wasn't even in the conversation at that point. He said, my wife, Mavis, is Lady Bird Johnson, President Johnson's wife, is going to be coming to town in the next 6 weeks. He says, if you guys are finished, I can arrange for her to be your guest. I said, we'll be finished. My partner who was doing the construction, I thought he was going to choke on his sandwich. And anyway, we were able to finish it. And there's a lot of stories, but I'll conclude this one for you. I know you got to get on with it. But so Secret Service came out, because even though he was deceased by then, the family continues to have Secret Service. They came out and vetted the place a week early and checked us all out and so forth. And then all of a sudden, here comes the entourage and the limo with Lady Bird Johnson. And my partner and I are standing on the porch. And he said, I said, what do we do now? He said, I'll tell you what, you get the door, I'll get the luggage. And that's how we started out. And so that was one that was fun that we had, you know, we built it up. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Any other questions? All right, last one. Where can people find out more about yourself, or property title, the ranch? Where would you direct them to get more information?
There's a website on property title if you want to take a look at that. Another way to do it is just come and have a cup of coffee with me and Linda, and we'll tell you whatever you want to know.
Nice.
We've been around for a long time. Property title is one of the oldest title companies, agencies in Louisiana. I always tell the story that when John Casabon, First American, he was going out soliciting agents for First American, and the only reason we're not the oldest is because he made an appointment earlier that morning with Moise Stieg, who you all may know in the real estate business. And but yeah, we have a lot of information we can share with you. There's some little trinkets I think on the table here.
Yeah.
But just give us a call and speak to Linda or myself.
Fantastic. Well, how about a round of applause for Mr. Torres?
Thank you. You want us to stick around?
It's up to you.
Okay, Jason, I think you guys, if you needed to head out, I think we had something in the morning.
Cool. Yeah, so totally up to you. What we'll do is a couple quick thank yous, of course, to Miss Linda. Thank you so much for Mr. Sydney Torres for giving us this space and having it set up and all. And then Caitlin and Jacob, Christian for helping kind of get all the logistics set up. Very much appreciated. What we'll do real quick is just a quick needs and wants, right? So we'll get a feel for who's in the room and what we're looking for. So if you are a realtor, just raise your hand up for me. Okay, a couple realtors, excellent. So it's a good opportunity to look around the room. If you need a realtor, we'll do the same thing with every other category there is. But look around, see who you want to network with, right, and link up with them after we're done here.